Sorry it took so long to get back to this video. I got injured and I was in the hospital for a while. But everything worked out fine. And so here we are today, still working with our dazed model, integrating it into faceshift. So I want to tell you right now, if you're here to push a button on your Xbox or just watch Second Life, then this video is not for you. You should probably keep surfing because it takes hours to integrate a model into faceshift. In this two-part video, we're going to start by separating the face components. Then we're going to add the mocap markers. We're going to go over proper labeling and then importing our model into faceshift. So, with that said, let's get started. Here we have the same dazed model that we've been working with. And the first thing that we want to do is separate the face components, because faceshift requires separated eyes and a separated jaw. So we're taking our model and we're duplicating it. Then we're hiding our original model by pressing Ctrl H. So that way if we mess it up, we have something to go back to. Next, we're going to select the skin of our model. And we're going to duplicate the skin because we don't want to delete the skin of our model. I'm pressing 4 here to move into the wireframe mode. Pressing Ctrl D to duplicate the skin. And then we're going to hide the original by pressing Ctrl H. Turning the clothes to transform so we can't select them. Switching to the faces of the polygon. Then we're going to select the faces and delete them. As you can see, if there's an IK skeleton, then it will select that every time. So we're going to hide the skeleton by pressing Ctrl H as well. If you want to bring things back from hiding them, you press Shift H. So now we're selecting the faces of the skin of our model. And we're going to delete the body so that we just have the head left. Then I'm pressing F to center so we can get in close. Now that I have this smaller mesh to work with, I'm going to duplicate it again by pressing Ctrl D. The first mesh, we're going to change the name to teeth. The second mesh, we're going to change the name to eyes. And then we're going to duplicate it a third time. And we're going to call the last one tongue. Because, like I was saying, faceshift needs to have these three components separated from the main model. It's really difficult to get in here and select these components on the inside. Pressing 5 to go to shaded mode. Having a really hard time finding the component I'm looking for. Not sure that there is an easy way to do this. Pressing 4 on my keyboard to get back to my wireframe mode. And then I'm pressing Shift angle bracket to expand the selection. I've selected the inside of the mouth and the outside of the head. Because we're not going to use those for part of the teeth. For some reason, this video was very difficult to make this time. We're going to select the entire outside of the head mesh, and then we're going to delete it. Next, we're going to make sure that we have the teeth selected. We're going to go to face. We're going to delete the eyes because they do not need to be part of the teeth either. Then we're going to go in and we want to duplicate the teeth mesh because there is an upper and lower set of teeth. Not going to make you sit here and watch me select and separate each of these components, but I'm basically using the same controls to go through and set up a separate component for each item: the tongue, the upper and lower jaw, and the eyes. Then I'm pressing Control G to group them. I'm calling them face. Pressing Control H to hide them, Control H to hide the skeleton. Then we're selecting the main mesh of the model. We're going to go back and delete the same components that we just copied because we don't want them to interfere in our final animation. By shift clicking, you can select 2 polygon faces at the same time and expand the selection and delete. Doing the same thing with the pupils, and then going through and deleting the gums, teeth, and tongue from the inside of the face without deleting the inside of the mouth. Now we have our separate components and our skin mesh and our skeleton. I'm adding a new layer by selecting the face components and then renaming them as face. It doesn't like that since there's already a face, so we're going space, face parts. But when you add a space, you have to use an underscore, otherwise it won't let you label your layer. So face underscore parts. And then I can just put them in transform mode also, so that we can see them but not select them. We want to select our mesh and go to the paint drop-down menu and click the second button, Make Paintable. Then we'll go to our last magnet, Make Object Live. We want to go to Skeleton, select our joint tool just like we did in the last lesson. And we're going to add the joints right onto the skin. After entering the first joint, you want to press Enter on the keyboard, otherwise it will create a joint chain. And we just want single joints in this instance. Before we get carried away though, let's save our scene. And then I'm taking a look at this picture here. And these are the different labels. These are the labels that SoftImage uses, and these are the labels that faceshift uses. This came from a video on the Autodesk Learning channel under SoftImage parts 1 through 11, which is right here on YouTube. Creating and animating a facial control rig using Face Robot. This is some actual mocap data which is in Motion Builder, which I transferred from faceshift to Motion Builder to see how it would work. As you can see, down in the lower right or lower left corner, all of the names for the mocap data are exactly the same as the ones from faceshift. So these are the same labels that we'll be using in Maya. As is the purpose of this lesson, to use only Maya to integrate with faceshift so that you don't have to spend an extra $1,000 on SoftImage and another $1,000 on Motion Builder. If we look at the mouth components here, we can see that there's 4 more markers than we put on the model in Maya. So I'm checking the naming of these markers, and then we're going to add these markers in on our model's face, just like they come from in the faceshift studio. So we want to add an upper and lower mid marker. Once again, I'm pressing enter to finish the joint chain before it starts creating a skeleton in between the joint ends. Using my picture as reference to make sure that I get all 40 markers onto the model. There's the nose tip and the nose flare. I believe they call it nose bulge. There's the nose bridge. So you can see I keep referring back to this picture to make sure that I get all of my markers in the correct place. Now we're adding the nose base, which is used for the sneer control. Again, if you recall from the last lesson, you can turn on symmetry, but then both joints will be connected together. And so that's why we're using each one of our joints individually, so that we can manipulate them also individually. Next, we're adding in the cheek puffer. And the ear. Now we're moving up to the eyeballs. If you'll notice here, I deleted the corners that we had added on earlier, since those are not used by faceshift. As you'll notice, this takes a really long time. Although Face Robot does offer an expedient way to map out the expressions on your face, unfortunately, it is not compatible with faceshift. Thus, we would have to go through and do all of this anyway. I'm using the picture as a rough reference to show where the markers are supposed to go on the face. As you also notice, I haven't named any of them. It's probably a good idea to name them while you're setting them. That way you don't have to go back, try to figure out which one is which. When it comes to computers, you want to get your upper and lower case as well as the spacing correct. Otherwise, they will not seamlessly mate between programs. Because computers can't tell the difference between what you intend and what you actually type. Some of the largest errors in computer software are typing errors. As you'll notice, I am not following the correct format for my uppercase and lowercase letters, so I'm going to have to go back and do it again. I probably could have just fast forwarded through this, but these principles are important and they take a great deal of time to do, so I figured I would take a great deal of time to explain them. Now I've caught on, and I'm going back to fix the typing errors that I've already made. If I would have done this in the first place, I probably would be done by now. Strangely, some of these markers are not listed in this reference for soft image, so it's a good thing that I had Motion Builder on hand so that I could get the proper nomenclatures for the markers. Even appears that I've missed a few. Continuing on with part 2, we're still adding the face markers that we have not yet gotten and labeling them. Now labeling the nose bridge. And the nose tip. If you'll notice, not all of the names are listed on this picture. So I go back to this Motion Builder rig, and you can see what the difference is between the nose base and the nostril bulge. The nostril bulge is the closer of the two markers, while the nostril base is the outside of the two. If you'll notice, I seem to be dyslexic. by naming these two markers backwards. This comes back to bite me later. Eventually, I do change them to the correct order. Now just the chin. Now by shift clicking, I'm selecting all of the markers. Or by drag clicking, I'm grouping like markers together so they're easier to find. Now that we have all the markers correctly placed and labeled, I'm going to put them into a group. You'll notice my Windows key keeps gimping out. There are a few markers that I missed. first I'm turning off the transform on the face parts because there's two more markers on the eye, one for the pupil and one for the direction. First I'm selecting the mesh and then clicking Make Paintable. Thank goodness for that extra button you never use. Now I'm making the mesh live by clicking the rightmost magnet. For some reason, I'm having difficulty setting this joint. It keeps attaching itself to the upper eyelid. But if we just move a little bit and try to place the joint again, we have no problems at all. These joints also are not listed on the picture, but they are listed in the Motion Builder mocap file from faceshift. The acronym is CT and PP. The P is for the pupil and the T is for the point. Amazingly, I can't tell the difference between right and left, so I have to do it twice. Here I'm trying to figure out how to place the directional marker onto the eyeball. First I turn off the skin, and then after looking for a place to place it, eventually I end up just placing it by hand in the orthographic view. Again, checking to make sure that my acronyms are correct. In this case, center point is CT, not CP. Now that we have all of our markers in place, I'm going to group them. As you can see though, they're not attached to the skin. By shift clicking, you can select all of the components. Then by pressing Ctrl G, you can group them. I'm now naming them markers. Placing them inside the model so that when you move the model, they will also be moved. Here's a list of the 39 markers since I realize it's difficult to see. Now that we have the markers in place, we're going to select the head joint. Then we are also going to select the 39 markers. Finally, selecting the skin, then going to Skin, Bind Skin, Smooth Bind. So we can see they didn't bind very well, so we're going to have to go through and paint our skin weights. This one doesn't seem to have turned out too bad. However, if we look at the eyelids, they still need some work. The upper eyelid does not work at all. If we go to our Paint Skin Weights tool, and select our eyelid, first we have to select our mesh. Then find our eyelid again. Our brush is gigantic size. Doesn't seem to be getting any smaller. But if we scroll down to stroke, we have the radius size right there. First, I'm removing all the influence from the upper forehead. Then using the smooth, cover up the area we just erased, so it blends nicely into the brow. Then we're removing the influence from the lower eye, as well as the eyelash. So we're just selecting the upper eyelid in this case. Since the eyelash is attached to the eyelid, we'll select the eyelash too. If you remember from our last lesson, the reason we selected the head joint is so that there is a null joint which carries all of the extra weight which is not attached to any of the face deformers. Once we have the portion selected, then we go back and try to move it, but as you can see, this does not work correctly either. The center of gravity is in the wrong place, and it is not interacting with the eyeball. So, we still need to work on this. But now that we have all of our markers in place and they are attached to the skin, albeit not correctly, we can try to load our model into faceshift. The first thing we want to do is save the model as an FBX, then turn on faceshift and go down into import and then load target. Then we'll find our FBX file and load it. Some major chug going on. Because the first thing you can see is the model is way too small. We're going to add our head joint where it says joint neck. This will properly align our model. Then we're going to add our right and left eyeball. Next, we're going to adjust our scale to about 80. And move our translation up about 26 to get our model aligned correctly. Once we have our model in the right place, then we'll hit OK. Then it will enter our model into faceshift. But as you can see, it is not correctly working. None of our markers are correctly working with the faceshift. And the reason for this is because we have not programmed our blend shapes yet, which are right here, the blend shapes, of which there are 52. So we have to go through and program 52 blend shapes, which we will do in our next lesson. Also in our next lesson, we will go over the mechanics of facial expressions. We'll go over the science of facial expressions. with references by Fagan. We'll go over blend shapes from 3D Magazine. And finally, we'll go over rigging from our good friends at Digital Tutors.